So tonight's story frightens me on so many levels, I think mainly because it's my dad's personal story. So with that being said, let's jump right into tonight's story. So grab your favorite tea and settle in, and let me tell you another scary Appalachian story, because of course, this is Tea After Midnight. This story is a personal encounter that happened to my dad. When you grow up in the 80s like I did, you are accustomed to being outdoors for most of the day. During summer breaks, we would go out first thing in the morning and not come in until dinner time, especially when you live in a house that has a chain link fence that encases the entire property. It was fall break and my older sister and I decided it would be a good idea to camp outside one night. My dad had built us a large playhouse that was elevated and sat about 6 feet above the ground. Underneath the playhouse there was a large sandbox that we would often play in. We gathered all of our supplies that we needed, which included the essentials: sleeping bags, blankets, and of course, marshmallows. We didn't have a fire to roast them, but we would put them on sticks and act as if we were roasting them on the open fire. We had always gone camping growing up, and it was one of our favorite things to do. So when we had a few days off from school, we begged our parents to stay out there for the night. As I mentioned earlier, we had a chain link fence that wrapped around the whole property that was pretty tall and had these spiky tips at the top. It was definitely a different time, and our parents said we could spend the night out there. We were honestly having a blast camping out there playing, and it was starting to get dark outside. My sister and I decided it was time to go up the side steps into the playhouse and get ready to sleep. It was raining, which added to the spookiness of the experience, and we were sitting there telling each other scary stories, trying to freak each other out. Both of us being kids, we never really expected to encounter something horrifying, but that's when we heard a loud thud hit the roof of the playhouse. It sounded like something with weight hit that roof, easily weighing 100 to 150 pounds. My sister and I were sitting there shaking, terrified of what just hit that roof. And that's when we heard it breathing. It sounded like guttural growling and raspy breathing, nothing we had ever heard before. The only thing separating us from the outside of that playhouse was a bedsheet we had hung up for some sense of security as well as to keep the bugs out. Whatever was on that roof then walked across the roof and jumped down to the steps right outside of that sheet. It then pushed the sheet in about 1.5 feet and pulled it to the side and peered in at us. That's when we saw the creature. It was a pale gray creature with almost a dark green tint to its skin. It had long limbs and fingers with nails that looked yellow and jagged. It was sat there crouching, peering in at us, and it was almost like we could tell it was trying to decide if we were going to be dinner or not. That's when it dropped the sheet and we heard it launch from the steps over to the trampoline we had next to the playhouse. This trampoline was easily 20 to 30 feet away from the playhouse, and within the span of 2 seconds, it was on the steps and over to that trampoline. We knew it was on the trampoline because we heard it land on it and the springs scrunched. We heard it jump one more time, and then we didn't hear it again after that. My sister and I were frozen in fear. Both of us were crying, not knowing if that thing was going to come back or not. It felt like an eternity sitting out there for that long. We sat out there in that playhouse for another 2 hours, terrified to get out and run inside, because we were afraid that whatever we just saw would come back and get us. And every single noise we heard, we would think that that thing was coming back. I kept telling my sister we needed to run inside to tell our parents, but she just kept telling me we should stay there because if we went outside, we wouldn't know where the thing was. I eventually talked her into both of us going inside, and we braced ourselves and ran as fast as we could inside, slamming shut and locking the door behind us. We went into our parents' bedroom and told them what we had just encountered, but they didn't believe us. My sister and I never really talked about it much after that. Anytime I would bring it up, she would get really scared and would brush it off because she didn't want to talk about it. This is easily the most terrifying experience I have ever encountered in my life. The Appalachian Mountains have and will always be a beautiful but terrifying place to be. Whoo, Dad. Every single time I hear or read this story, I get instant chills because that is absolutely terrifying. And to you guys, the very first time my dad told me this story, I got instant chills and tears in my eyes because I couldn't imagine being a kid just wanting to go outside and camp one night, because you're in an encased property. There's a chain link fence that goes around the whole property, and you should be safe back there, or so you think, and you see a creature like this. Absolutely not. But not only the creature peering in at you guys, but then the description of the creature is what freaks me out so bad. It sounded like guttural growling and raspy breathing. A pale gray creature with an almost dark green tint to its skin, with long limbs and fingers that had jagged yellow fingernails. Ugh, that gives me the chills. But also, the next part that scares me is it was on the steps, 1 second. 2 seconds later, it was over on the trampoline that's 20 to 30 feet away. I don't know anybody that can jump from here to 20 to 30 feet away to another object within 2 seconds. And they heard it land on the trampoline once because the springs on the trampoline scrunched, and then they heard it one more time, and then it disappeared. I don't know where that creature went. I don't know what happened. I don't know how it even got into the backyard to begin with, but that is terrifying to me. And Dad, I am so sorry that you guys went through that. That is horrifying, and I couldn't imagine. But Dad, thank you so much for sharing your story and allowing me to share it with everyone else. I hate that you guys went through that, though. That is absolutely horrifying, and I couldn't imagine going through that. But anybody in the comments that has an idea of what this could have been, please let us know, because we've been talking about it, and the closest thing we can think of would be a rake. But that does conclude this episode of Tea After Midnight. If you have any personal scary stories you want to share, I would love to read them, and they do not have to be about the Appalachian Mountains. They can be about any scary encounter that you've ever had. You can email me at the email on the screen or the email in the caption of this video. But as always, you guys, thank you so much for being here. I hope you know how much I love you. I hope you have the best night, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Why are there so many creepy first date stories? Honestly, I'm getting a lot lately. But this one just sent a shiver down my spine. So a man met a girl on Bumble. Her name was Ivy. They hit it off great. They were from the same town. And eventually they said, shall we meet up for a first date and go for dinner? So the guy got there early and he went to the hostess and says, I've got a table booked under Ivy. And she looks at him and says, there is no table booked under Ivy, but we can seat you. He's texting Ivy saying there must have been a mix up with the reservations. I'm waiting at the hostess table. Gets no reply. About 15 minutes go by. The hostess says, do you want me to seat you? And he says, no, I'm waiting for somebody. He's feeling a little bit embarrassed. And Ivy's still not replying to his text messages and he thinks I'm being ghosted. But he perseveres and waits another 15 minutes. That's when a man walks through the door in a hoodie, walks straight up to him and says, hey, are you Jacob? This guy didn't recognise the man in the hoodie and he says, yeah, my name's Jacob. What's wrong? And he says, oh, I'm Ivy's brother. She's actually really ill, but she really wants to see you. She wants me to pick you up and take her back to our house. So this guy Jacob stands there and says, oh, why didn't Ivy just text me this? And he goes, oh, funny story, she broke her phone. Then Jacob's a bit confused and he's thinking, I really do want to see this girl, but this whole situation's really weird. Before he even answers, Ivy's brother says, I can just drive you. We live like 2 blocks away. It's not very far. And Jacob's starting to get some red flags and he's thinking, you know what? I'll just walk if you give me the address. And then Ivy's brother says, yeah, but it's a really difficult address to get to. It's easier if I just show you. And Jacob didn't like that line and he says, do you know what? I'm just going to cancel. Let's wait till Ivy feels better. And then Ivy's brother steps back and goes, well, she's not going to be happy that you've done this, but okay, have a nice night. But how he says have a nice night is like really aggressive. Then Jacob leaves the restaurant and he goes to his car and he's got this really eerie feeling and he's looking around thinking, what the fuck's just happened? He gets in his car and as he leaves the parking lot, he sees Ivy's brother just standing, staring at him. He decides not to text Ivy because he's just got this massive red flag and he just goes home, chills out, goes to bed. That's when he gets loads of notifications on his phone of somebody trying to access his email, his banking app, his social media. So he's quickly scrambling, like trying to change all his passwords. And that's when he gets a text from Ivy through Bumble saying, "You should have come tonight." And he replies to Ivy saying, "I'm really sorry, but your brother came across pretty strong and I wasn't very comfortable and you never told me you had a brother." And then Ivy replies and says, "I don't have a brother." And then her account gets deactivated. Weird. Just a few hours later, he gets a knock at the door. And obviously, it's now in the middle of the night. He's not going to answer it. And because he's not answering it, the knocks are more aggressive. Jacob contemplates whether to call the police, but all he's getting is knocks at the door, and he lives in an apartment block. Like, what they're going to do? So he creeps to the peephole, and he doesn't see anybody. Doesn't see anybody at all, and the motion lights on. But he can hear heavy stomping, like somebody's running down the stairs. That's when he gets a text from an unknown number saying, "Are you having a good night?" Fuck no. No, I'm not having a good night. What the fuck? Jacob immediately blocks that number, and over the course of the next 24 hours, he's being bombarded with different text messages, different calls, leaving voicemails of just horrendous insults, just saying horrible things to him. Jacob is obviously more than creeped out, but he wants to go to the police with evidence of who this guy could be. So he goes to the restaurant and says to the hostess, "Hey, I was here a few nights ago. I walked out," describes the man in the hoodie and the situation, what happened. And he just says, "Don't suppose you recognise this man, or if you had a table booked for a similar time that I was here." And the hostess says, "It's actually really weird that you say that, because there was a man in a hoodie that was lurking outside of the restaurant for about an hour before you came. And that's the man that walked up to you." Jacob's like, "Great, do you have any CCTV footage of this man?" But unfortunately, because he's wearing a hoodie, you can't see him. Jacob still goes to the police and says everything that's happened, and the police say, "Well, technically no crime has been committed." Which, why do the police always wait until something bad happens to actually help you? They basically just tell him to be vigilant and record anything that happens. So over the next week, he is still being bombarded with texts and voicemails, again, horrible things. And also he's randomly getting matches on Bumble. From loads of women all of a sudden interested in him. Clearly, Ivy's brother is a catfish. Jacob decides to get off the dating scene and just delete Bumble and completely get a new phone. It kind of quiets down the following week, and one day when he's taking out his trash, he opens up the trash can handle and there's a bit of paper. He unfolds the paper and it's a photo printout of him, like in his apartment, and written on it says, "You." You're like, no shit, of course it's me. Over the course of about 3 months, random letters and photos would turn up to his house, random knocks in the middle of the night, which forced Jacob to move. Sorry, I'm moving a lot. My son keeps on trying to grab my phone. Jacob goes to the police and they don't do anything. They never help him. So Jacob has to move. Comes off LinkedIn, comes off every social media, has to pretty much change his whole persona online. And that's the only way he got this creep to stop stalking him. One thing that Jacob's certain of is if he got in Ivy's brother's car that night, he probably wouldn't be here today. He don't know who that person was, don't know what they were going to do to him when they got to their second location or even in the car, but he doesn't even want to think about it. Do you have a weird dating horror story? If you do, let me know. Email in bio.
Imagine you're hiking alone in the Appalachian Mountains, and not the more populated part, but the more dense, kind of, you're very much alone part. Kind of place where the trees grow so thick that it blocks out the sky. We're talking deep Appalachia. Imagine you're standing there in a place where there should be no people, and all of a sudden you hear laughter. Children's laughter. But there are no children because, like I just said, nobody is supposed to be out there. Sound coming deeper from the woods and you don't know what to do. You just freeze and you stand there. Every bone, every muscle in your body is telling you not to follow the sound. Now here's where that story of fiction kind of flows into a story of non-fiction when you enter the Scottish Highlands. Once you take that 4,000-mile trek over there, you'll hear versions of that exact story. That's where today's rabbit hole truly begins. The little people, the hidden people, the good folk, or sometimes even referred to as the fair folk. tiny beings that supposedly live out in the mountains, and they've terrorized humans for centuries. Scotland and Appalachia have way more in common than just similar stories, though. They're actually connected in a way that most people don't even realize. Around like 480 to 490 million years ago, those two land masses were one. Basically the same like mountain building event that built the Appalachians also built the Scottish Highlands. I always say that the Appalachian Mountains are older than bones, older than dinosaurs, and the Scottish Highlands are not much younger. Which is probably why both places feel so ominous and ancient, like it's hard to explain. And centuries later, another connection between the two lands formed, and that would be its people. During the 1700s and the 1800s, a bunch of Scottish Highlanders actually migrated to Appalachia. They ended up settling in the mountains. They brought their music, they brought their cultures, brought their superstitions, and they brought their stories. And with those stories, one of them emerged about the little people. In Scotland, these beings were often referred to as fairies. If you're imagining like Tinkerbell or Silver Mist, then you better stop right now. Because the Highland fairies are absolutely terrifying. They aren't cute little magical creatures, they're dangerous. They could kidnap people, they could steal children, place babies with changelings, cause sickness, literally driving people insane, and also driving travelers off of the side of cliffs. Most any Scot will tell you that this is not just a story, it's not just folklore, it's very much based in truth. Because they thought that it was very truthful, they would leave offerings to these beings like milk, bread, butter, small gifts, little things like that. It wasn't because they loved them or enjoyed their company, it was because they feared them, so they were like giving them things to like, here, don't kill me please, here you go. The goal was never friendship, it was always survival. You always wanted to make these things happy, right? Because if you ever offended one of these things, it could ruin your entire life. Now let's jump across the ocean, okay? Because Native American tribes of Appalachia also had supernatural stories kind of like this. The Cherokee tribes told stories of, I'm gonna butcher this, okay? It's called the, fuck you, I'm gonna put it right here. It's this. I'm not gonna listen to anybody make fun of me. So it's this, but it roughly translates to the little people. Unlike the fairies of the Highlands, the Yunwi actually were a little bit less malicious. Don't get me wrong, they definitely could be, but they were also very helpful. Or they could be very helpful. Some of these types of fairies would actually like warn hunters and travelers of impending doom or danger. Now this is a story that I read or listened to a couple of years ago, I can't remember which one, of a 411 missing like person who's out there looking for the people. Okay, what am I saying? I don't know. He ended up getting stranded out there and lost himself, and he actually came across these fairies or whatever, and they ended up giving him medicinal advice. Ended up like helping him fix himself up just enough to get out of the woods by himself. Some stories even say that the fairies of that side of the world would literally protect the children, but there's always a catch. As with everything, there's always a catch, and the catch with this was that you had to respect them. If you even so much as mocked them one time, you could be in serious danger, girl. If you've spent time online at all, or even at all on my page, then you've heard a lot of stories about Appalachia. Regardless, many of those stories end the same way. Basically just like this primal feeling that you should not be where you are right now. And Scottish stories are almost identical to the Appalachian Trail mountain stories, whatever. Like I said, it's because they have this long history together. They're connected, bro. It's all connected. In the Highlands, there's these mountain ranges that are specifically known to be like entrances to the Fae's home. Not just their home, like it's like a portal. It's like I've talked about portals before in Appalachia, but as I'm saying, everything's connected. There's definitely these things over in Scotland too. There have been reports of people seeing fairy realms. Like there's like this thing, you walk through the mountain basically, and there's the fairy realm. It's not Earth anymore, seemingly so. There are even stories about travelers who heard music playing from underground around these areas. There is also this idea around the Highlands that there's this thing called fairy paths, which are like invisible little kind of animal trails almost. If you end up building one of these fairy paths on your property, bad things will happen. Livestock will die. Families even become sick. And terrible, terrible accidents occur. To this day, there are actually roads in Scotland that are diverted as to avoid the fairy paths. What's even creepier about the comparison between these two places is that both Appalachia and the Scottish Highlands have like this time warping effect. In Scotland, there are stories of people who have entered these like fairy mounds, the fairy realm, right? And only were there for a day or maybe a couple hours. But when they came out, they had been gone for years. Not months, not weeks, not days, fucking years, bro. I've talked about this before on my page. What's even more scary about this one is that they didn't just come out feeling like disoriented and they still got to go back to their families. No. Sometimes these people would go missing for so long in the fairy realm that they would come back out and every person that they knew and loved was gone. It was like they had just stepped into the future and it was just a whole brand new generation of people. So if you ever hear laughter out in the woods or music or see strange lights out in the mountains, it could definitely be the fairies of the Scottish Highlands or the fairies of the Appalachian Mountains. Whichever side you're on, they are very much the same.
It's been a long time, but let's talk about something scary. Someone who sent me this email titled it, "Some apartments come furnished, this one came haunted." The person who sent me this email did not specify whether or not they wanted to remain anonymous, so I'm going to keep them anonymous. The email starts off by her kind of explaining the situation that was occurring when her mom and dad were living in this apartment in India. Her mom was pregnant at the time with the person who sent me this email. They had moved into a very small apartment that was essentially a bedroom that faced outwards towards a kitchen and a hallway. From my understanding, they had been living there for some time while her mom was pregnant with her. All of a sudden, the energy in the actual apartment just shifted. Her parents had a dog at the time. Once they were settled in, they noticed that their dog would bark at the hallway towards the bedroom consistently. Mom always thought the dog was just hungry and that's why it was barking. So she would get out food, the dog wouldn't eat, and it would continue to whine at this corner. After the mom sets out the food, the dog goes quiet, runs into their bedroom, and hides underneath the bed and is shaking. Mom goes into the room, thinks that the dog is scared of the fan that is on, decides to turn it off. The dog is still not coming out from underneath the bed, and she thinks that it is her upstairs neighbors, maybe on the second or third floor. Their dog continues to sit in this position until the person who sent me this email's dad got home from his night shift. Mom explains everything that happened. They both go to the landlord the next day and find out that somebody had in their apartment from the fan immediately decided to move out. Ands ifs or buts, they moved out the same day that they were told that. And the landlord specifically said that her presence has never left that apartment. Honestly, I don't blame them. I would have done the same thing. But anyways, that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for more ghost stories.
What would you do if your neighbor asked why you were outside barefoot at 3 a.m., but you were asleep the entire night? This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about the woman that my neighbor saw outside my house. I woke up one morning to a text from my neighbor that said, "Are you okay?" That was it. She was an older woman who lived behind me, and we weren't close, but we were friendly enough. We waved when we saw each other outside, and she brought my trash cans up once when I was out of town, that kind of thing. So I texted back and asked what she meant. A few minutes later, she replied, "I saw you in your backyard last night." I stared at the message for a second, confused, and then I wrote back, "What time?" And she said, "Around 3 a.m. That made me sit up in bed because I had been asleep at 3 a.m. I asked what exactly she saw. She said she had gotten up to use the bathroom and happened to look out her back window. From there, she could see part of my backyard near the fence. And she said I was standing there, barefoot, in a nightshirt, and just facing my house. At first, I thought maybe she'd seen someone else, maybe a shadow, or one of those weird half-awake things people see when they're tired. But then she said, "I was going to call you, but then you turned and looked right at my window." I didn't like that. I asked what I did after that, and she took a while to answer, and then she wrote, "You waved." I felt this cold feeling going through my body, because I don't sleepwalk, I never have, and my bedroom is upstairs. My back door was locked when I went to bed, and it was still locked that morning. I checked. And then I checked my phone. It had been charging beside my bed all night. I checked my sleep app, and it showed me asleep for a little after midnight until almost 7. I know those apps aren't perfect, but still, nothing suggested I got up, walked downstairs, unlocked the back door, stood barefoot in the yard, waved at my neighbor, and then came back in and locked everything behind me. I asked her if she was sure it was me, and she said, "I thought it was." The wording bothered me more than I wanted it to. I asked what she meant, and she didn't answer for almost an hour. And then she finally wrote, "It looked like you from my window." I didn't text back after that. I tried to go through my day like normal, but I kept thinking about it. I kept looking out into my backyard from different rooms, trying to picture where she would have been seeing me standing. And that night, I locked everything twice. The front door, the back door, the windows, the bedroom door. I even left the hallway light on like a child because I didn't care. I was too creeped out to sleep in full darkness. And for a while, nothing happened. And then at 3:07 a.m., my phone buzzed on my nightstand. It was my neighbor. The message said, "She's back." I sat up so fast I got dizzy, and for a few seconds I just stared at the text, waiting for another one to come through, hoping she'd say she was just kidding or that she made a mistake. But she didn't. I typed, "Where?" And she replied, "Your yard." I got out of bed, but I moved slowly. I don't know why. Like, if I made too much noise, whatever outside would know I was awake. My bedroom window faces the backyard, so I walked over and looked down. And at first I saw nothing. The fence and the tree and the patch of grass by the back gate. The patio furniture. No one was standing back there. I texted my neighbor, "I don't see anything." And she wrote back almost immediately, "Don't open the window." I froze. I had already unlocked it. My hand was already under the frame. I don't know why I still did it. I think I needed to prove to myself that this was all nothing, that my neighbor was confused, that I was scaring myself over a yard and a shadow. So I opened the window just a little. Not enough to stick my head out, just enough to listen. And the night outside was completely still. I couldn't hear any cars or wind or insects. It was nothing. I looked down again, and the yard was empty. I was about to shut the window when I heard a voice directly below me, clear and close, and barely louder than a whisper. "You weren't supposed to look." I slammed the window shut so hard the glass rattled, and then I backed away from it and sat on my bed with every light on until morning. My neighbor never texted me again that night, and the next day I went over to her house. I wanted her to tell me what she saw. I wanted her to say it was a mistake. I wanted anything that made it feel less real. But the second she opened the door and saw me standing there, she went pale. I asked what happened, and she shook her head. And then she said, "I don't want to talk about the woman in your yard." I said, "Woman?" And she looked past me toward my house, and then she said, "It looked like you until it looked up." I moved 6 months later. I never saw the woman myself, not fully, but sometimes I still think about the fact that I opened that window, and something waiting underneath it knew I had. Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
Imagine looking at your mother and knowing that she looks exactly like your mom, but you know in your soul that that is not your mother. Not a lookalike, not a clone, but an imposter. As impossible as this sounds, this is one of the most fascinating and most disturbing psychological disorders that has ever been documented, and it's called Capgras delusion. And the reason that it's so disturbing is because the people who experience it don't fail to recognize their loved ones. They know that they're looking at their spouse or their child or their parent or their best friend. They see every detail perfectly, it's just that something inherently feels wrong. One patient reportedly described his wife by saying this: "She looks exactly like my wife, she sounds like my wife, but she isn't my wife." It's not the failure of sight, it's the failure of familiarity. And in and of itself, this is not a diagnosis, it's more of a symptom of a bigger problem. Currently, when you see a face that's familiar to you, two things happen. First, you will recognize a person's features like the nose, the eyes, the voice, the smile. But a second process always happens without you even feeling it, and that is familiarity. You get an emotional signal from looking at this face, knowing that this person is safe, this person's your friend, this person's your parent, this person is known. Researchers believe that in the people that are experiencing Capgras delusion, that emotional signal somehow gets disrupted. While that facial recognition is still there, that connection no longer is. And the reason that this is so scary to me is because, like, I'm just imagining getting a call from my best friend, like hearing her voice, we're yapping about something, spilling the tea, but then just feeling like this isn't her. It's like two completely conflicting information pieces in your brain. And one thing that I know about the brain is that it hates contradictions and it wants an explanation. And for some individuals, the explanation becomes, this isn't my friend, someone's replaced them. And even though this is such a strange explanation, it's really just the brain trying to make sense of a broken signal. And that's what makes this condition so horrifying, because it suggests that reality isn't as strong as we'd like to think. People we love don't feel familiar just because we see them. They feel familiar because of thousands of unconscious processes happening in our brains at all times. And if one of those processes fails, the closest person to us can become a stranger. The first person to ever be described as having Capgras delusion was a patient by the name of Madame M. And her case is honestly one of the creepiest because she didn't just think one person had been replaced from her life. She believed that almost every single person in her life was a double. Her husband replaced, her daughters replaced, her neighbors definitely replaced. And for individuals who have passed away in her life, she felt like they were still living and that they had an imposter who was also a fake. And she was being possibly surrounded with not only dozens of imposters, but hundreds. Another case that's widely recognized as a part of this delusion is the man who thought that his wife was replaced with not just one wife, but with multiple wives. Like an imposter came in replacing his wife, and then another imposter came in replacing the first imposter. Then another after that. Every single time his brain felt off, he generated a new explanation, which sounds totally irrational, but the emotional signal that says, "This is my wife," was not working. Some researchers think that this illustrates something important about delusions, and it's that people often create stories to make sense of strange feelings. Like your brain is trying to solve a mystery that it created itself. One of the most famous cases to ever come out of this involved a woman who became convinced that her husband was not only an imposter, but an extraterrestrial mimicking him. So she believed that her husband was replaced by a shape-shifting alien. But where this gets even creepier to me is the connections to this delusion and folklore. All throughout medieval Europe, there are stories about fairies stealing children and replacing them with lookalikes called changelings. And changelings in European folklore is a supernatural being left in place of a human child, stolen by fairies, elves, or other spirits. The legend reflects pre-modern attempts to explain illness, disability, or sudden behavioral changes in infants, blending superstition with social and moral fears about family and belonging. Parents would insist that the child looked the same, the child sounded the same, but something was different and something felt wrong. Modern researchers have wondered whether some historical changeling accusations could have involved neurological or psychiatric conditions similar to Capgras, which they haven't been able to prove, but the similarities there are eerie. As someone who's involved in the paranormal field, I feel like this could explain a lot of stories. A lot of other folklore, I feel like, revolves like someone mimicking, someone changing, someone not being who they are, doppelgangers. And there's actually a condition that's somehow even stranger because the reverse is true. Even though I have a master's in clinical mental health and I had heard about Capgras delusion, I hadn't heard about this one. It's called Fergoli delusion. And instead of believing that loved ones are being replaced by strangers, the person believes that strangers are actually one person in disguise. So imagine seeing like a cashier, a neighbor, a police officer, and thinking that these are all one person just wearing different masks of other people. And something about all this is so existential to me, because if a single broken signal in our brain can turn a loved one into a stranger, how much of reality is just feeling? Like, I cannot imagine looking at Noodle and thinking that it's another dog just wearing his face. You're not my dog.
Somebody submitted a spooky story saying that they were recruited into a secret society in New York, and leaving was the scariest part. I am back with another spooky story, and you're in for a ride. I'm gonna call the person who submitted the story Kinsey. Now, Kinsey says that she's not saying every secret society is evil. She's not saying that what she experienced represents every group. She's only sharing what happened to her. So about 3 years ago. So Kinsey was 24 and she had just moved to Manhattan for work. She didn't know many people and was desperate to make connections. One night, after an invite-only networking event in Soho, a woman approached her. And this woman somehow knew Kinsey's full name, where she worked, and even mentioned a conversation that she had had earlier that night. This lady smiles at Kinsey and says, "You're exactly the type of person we're looking for." At first, she thought it was a business club. Over the next few weeks, she was invited to private dinners in beautiful brownstones and penthouses. Everyone around was incredibly successful. Had lawyers, artists, entrepreneurs, people you'd recognize if she said their names. The secret society never asked for money, and they never pressured her to do anything illegal. Instead, they often talked about discipline, influence, symbolism, history, and they had this very specific thing about unlocking hidden potential. Honestly, Kinsey loved it. They encouraged reading difficult books, meditation, volunteering, dressing professionally, limiting social media, and building financial independence. Kinsey said it genuinely made her a better person in some ways. But there was another side. After about a month, they began holding meetings after midnight. And in those meetings, phones had to stay outside, the windows were covered, there were candles and herbs around, people came in wearing different masks, and no one in those meetings used their real names. Kinsey said the first few ceremonies felt symbolic. The group would recite old passages in languages that she really didn't recognize. They would light incense. They would stand in a circle discussing duality, temptation, and human nature. So it's all normal, but weird. Overall, she thought it was just tradition. Then they introduced Kinsey to something called the oath. Now, she wasn't told exactly what it was beforehand. Now, during the ceremony, they asked her to place her hand on an old leather book. The book was covered in like all these strange symbols. All of this while they're repeating promises of lifelong loyalty and secrecy. At one point, they asked them to say that they would place the order above family, relationships, and personal beliefs. That sentence really stuck with Kinsey. Everyone else repeated it without hesitation. Kinsey, however, stayed silent. Afterwards, one of the members pulled her aside, told her that she was allowing fear to keep her ordinary. She wound up apologizing and eventually finished the ceremony because she felt embarrassed. But she said after that night, things became different. So I literally don't have a job now, so you don't have to wait 24 hours for part 2. It is going to be a part 2, but I swear I'm recording it right now. Let's leave a comment for part 2. Love you. Back in less than 24 hours with part 2. Come on. Well, Kinsey finishes the ceremony. After that night, that's when things became different. And not in a good way. So several of those members claim that they communicated with spiritual entities during their meditation. Some of those members woke up believing that they could receive guidance through dreams, symbols, or rituals. Kinsey herself never saw anything supernatural happen in front of her, but they spoke about it as if it were completely normal. Now, she wasn't expected to worship Satan directly, but Lucifer was often described as a symbol of rebellion, knowledge, and enlightenment, rather than the cartoon version that people imagine. Some of the members took that symbolically, while some members seemed to believe something much more literal. That split in belief made Kinsey uncomfortable. The deeper you went, the more your life was expected to revolve around the group. You miss some meetings, people start asking questions. If you date outside the circle, they would subtly discourage it. And every single time someone would question a ritual, they would always tell you, your ego is resisting transformation. The pressure wasn't aggressive, it was psychological. It never made her feel like she had to do anything. Convinced herself that it would be a disservice for her if she didn't follow along. So you slowly stop trusting your own instincts because everybody around you insisted they knew better. She said the moment she decided to leave happened after a gathering in an old building downtown. So near the end of the ceremony, the leader said, every meaningful sacrifice costs something like that. Everyone nodded. For some reason at that moment, Kinsey started feeling sick. Now, Kinsey is throwing up. Someone was with her and Kinsey's trying to figure out why she's throwing up suddenly. The lady tells her, well, you know, the wine doesn't really sit that well the first few times you have it. Kinsey's like, yeah, I mean, liquor do tend to do that. And the lady looks at Kinsey and says, liquor? Oh, you ain't know? Apparently, the wine was spiked with human blood. Against Kinsey's knowledge, all those meetings where she was drinking the wine, it was mixed in with... And apparently, that's what was making her sick. At this point, Kinsey felt disgusted and she felt like this is way too deep. She decided that she was gonna stand up, walk out, block everybody, and never come back. Problem solved. Except, no. She started having horrific nightmares. Every night she would dream that she's in the same candlelit room. She would hear people chanting her name. Sometimes while she's trying to fall asleep, she would feel people touching her and she's by herself. She says from her peripheral, she started seeing a tall figure. It wasn't every day, but it was often enough to terrify her. Whenever she would check or turn on the lights, nothing was there. Her apartment felt heavy. Her friends was telling her that she looked exhausted. She constantly felt like she was being watched. Maybe it was anxiety. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was just her imagination after everything that she just went through. But honestly, she doesn't know. She said out of that fear, she got herself a therapist and started going to church. And she says that's when she was reintroduced to Jesus Christ. And ever since she gave her life to the church instead, the nightmares became less frequent. Every once in a while though, she would still have them. But she feels that Jesus is protecting her from the demons of her past. And interestingly enough, when she spoke with her therapist helped her understand how intense groups can leave long-lasting psychological effects, even without anything paranormal happening. So whether the things she experienced afterwards were spiritual or simply trauma, she can't fully say. But what she knows is that she doesn't regret anything because that road led her straight to her savior, Jesus Christ. Thank you for submitting your spooky story. I just dropped part 2 on the same day. I'm literally beating the allegations. Come on. I love you, my abducted humans, from your favorite Haitian homegirl.
So, this is called Final Goodbye from Mary.
Oh, I don't know who Mary is, but I hope she's well. Well, dead, I imagine.
One night, I was over at my mum and stepdad's house. My stepdad had popped out to the shops, so it was just my mum and me in the kitchen cooking dinner. At one point, I needed the loo, so I walked out of the kitchen, into the hallway, towards a small toilet under the stairs. Just as I was about to open the door, I heard a knock. It came from the lounge door, which was directly opposite the toilet. The first time, it was just a faint, gentle tap, but it was enough to stop me dead in my tracks. I turned back to the kitchen. I asked my mum, "Did you hear that?" She was about to say no, but it happened again. This time, 2 loud, deliberate knocks.
Wow.
I was petrified. I ran back to my mum, and at the end of the far kitchen, there's a door leading into the dining room, which connected to the lounge via a set of glass French doors. Mum and I figured we should probably check it out from that angle. We cautiously popped our heads around the door, but the room was completely still. We walked in, found nothing. We decided to brush it off and forget about it. Shortly after, Mum and I headed upstairs because she wanted to show me a dress she'd bought. We were up there and we heard my stepdad's car pull up the drive. A moment later, he walked through the front door and he started talking to someone. I shouted down the stairs, "Who are you talking to?" He sounded confused. "You two. You're in the living room."
Jesus Christ, no, we're not. Daddy?
No, Daddy. No, stepdad. No, I replied. "We're both upstairs in your bedroom." There was a pause. "You definitely weren't just in the living room. We've been up here for 10 minutes. My stepdad went pale. He told us that as he was driving up the driveway, he saw someone pull back the living room blinds and look out of the window, staring straight
vile.
at him. At this point, we were utterly freaked out, thinking an actual intruder was in the house. My stepdad searched every single room from top to bottom, but found absolutely no one. The real chills came the next day. My mum received a phone call from her ex-husband's brother. He was calling to let her know that his mum, Mary, had sadly passed away and a funeral had actually taken place the day before. A massive shiver went down our spines. My mum had always gotten on brilliantly with Mary, even if things didn't work out with her son, and Mum was really upset no one had told her sooner. She absolutely would have gone to pay her respects. We truly believe that Mary was just stopping by to say her final goodbye. Love the show, Hans.
Want to hear something scary? Have you ever heard the creepypasta called "My Brother Died at Birth and My Parents Still Made Me Share a Room with Him"? No? Me neither. Want to hear it? This story does have themes of infant unalive and adult unalive, so if that makes you really uncomfortable, scroll away. I haven't been home in a really long time. I left for college as soon as I could the second I turned 18. I've wanted to come back, but every time I tried or came close, I always chickened out, making excuses. I almost came back home when I found out my dad had a stroke, but once again, I couldn't do it. That's until I got a call from the hospital just the other night after work. They told me my mom had passed on the way there, from a blood clot that went to her heart, and that someone would have to figure out what to do with the house. The drive home felt longer than I remembered, and as I pulled into the driveway, I had the urge to peel out and never look back. But as much as I hate this house, I can't just leave it. I push open the car door, walking up the steps of the front porch, and push open the front door with a low creak. The house was dark, but clean, as if it had just recently been dusted, and I imagine it had, by my mother. With my father and my mother gone, the house was extremely quiet and still. At least, mostly. I walked up the steps to the second floor where my old bedroom was, and slowly, stepping through the doorframe, looked inside. My bed was neatly made with all my things in place, and next to it was an empty crib. Jamie's crib. When I was born, I was supposed to be born with a brother. My parents had already picked out both our names, both our cribs, and had a room all decorated. One side for me, and one side for Jamie. But when we were born, I came out all red-faced and screaming, and my brother came out quiet. He had passed away, tangled up in the umbilical cord. It didn't take me long, as I gained consciousness of the world and understanding to know that something was wrong with my family. As I got older and grew out of my crib, Jamie's crib stayed. And as I grew old enough to understand speech, Jamie's name was one of the first on my lips. "Say goodnight to your brother, Tom," my mom used to say every night before bed, gesturing to Jamie's empty crib. At first, I'd go along with it. "Good night, Jamie," I'd say, making my mother smile gently before closing the door and engulfing the room in darkness. I thought maybe my mom was playing a game, or it was her way of making me feel better about the loss of my brother. But as I got older, I realized it wasn't that at all. She began forming rules. Don't cross the rug over to Jamie's side. He doesn't like it when you disturb his things. Don't play with Jamie's toys. If you move them, put them back exactly how you left them, Tom. And lastly, don't go into the hallway closet. When I broke these rules, the house would change. When I was growing up, I was too short to reach the key that hung over the hallway closet. But as I got older, I also got taller. Once I reached a height tall enough, I waited patiently for the perfect day. My mom and dad were downstairs arguing in the kitchen, too busy to hear anything I was doing upstairs. So I crept out of my room, standing on my tippy toes, and grabbed the key before pressing it into the doorknob and turning it. The door popped open with a soft squeak, and I peered inside, disappointed in what I found. Boxes in the corner, old baby clothes in stacks, and coats hanging on the coat rack. I sigh, about to shut the door, but pause when I see something peeking out from one of the coats. I reach in, pulling out a blue baby book that's obviously my mom's, and I open it. Her handwriting is cursive and neat as she writes about Jamie and I. Tom and Jamie were just born, but they're already so closely bonded. Jamie likes when Tom sings. I'm so proud of my boys. But then the journal entries changed. He won't eat unless Tom's in the room. He cries for hours when Tom leaves, and only sleeps when Tom is near. And as the entries changed, so did the handwriting. It turned crooked and rushed, the ink smudged in odd places. The night terrors are back. I hear him at the door. I think Jamie blames me. The entries stop after that. I stand there for a long time, reading those words over and over, so long that darkness settles over the hallway, and the argument that had been happening had long since stopped. I realize the time. Stuffing the notebook back in the coat and shutting the door, locking it, I place the key back on its hook and then walk back to the bedroom. I've started sleeping with my back to Jamie's crib, not wanting him to make a surprise appearance. Lately, the whispering has been getting worse. I'll hear him talking in hushed tones on the other side of the room, or walking around. Sometimes his fire truck will start in the dead of night, as if he's playing. Other times I'll wake up with my blanket pulled off me, laying neatly on the floor. Jamie's stuffed animals also tend to move as well. One morning they can be by the window, and the next tucked into the covers of his crib. I prefer not to look. I toss and turn in my bed, unable to sleep, and my eyes fall on his empty crib. I know I shouldn't. I don't even know why I have the urge, but before I know it, I'm moving. Okay, here's my thing. If your unalived brother is a ghost in your house doing all of this stuff that I literally just named, why would you get up and go and decide to lay in his crib for literally no reason? After you know you should not even be on his side of the room using his stuff, whatever, and you just broke a rule. What is wrong? I know he's like probably 7 in this, but like I feel like 7-year-olds are smarter than that, like, you know? I walked to the crib, looking at its faded mattresses. Mattresses? Multiple? Mattresses? Multiple. Multiple mattresses. The mattresses have multiplied. What are you talking about right now? I walked to the crib, looking at its faded mattress and the old stuffed toys before climbing up into it and laying on my back, looking up at the ceiling. I don't know why I did this. Curiosity, maybe? Something else? I don't know. But eventually, I do fall asleep. I wake up to something jutting painfully in my back and groggily open my eyes, realizing I'm no longer in my room. I jolt up, cloth hitting my face as it presses into the familiar texture of a coat. I look behind me and see the boxes stacked with old baby clothes. I try the doorknob. It's locked. I start to panic, slamming my shoulder into the door, trying to get the latch to unlatch on the outside of the door. After a few good shoves, the door bursts open. The noise has my mom running from her room. She looks at me, kneeling on the floor, the neatly stacked baby clothes now strewn behind me. She looks at me silently, for a long time, before speaking in a quiet and distant tone. You disrespected his space. Then with that, she turns, walking back into her bedroom. As an adult, that memory has an odd discomfort coursing through me just at the idea of it. I turn away from my bedroom and walk down the hallway to that very closet, now tall enough to easily grab the key. I unlock the door, pushing it open and seeing everything is relatively the same, except the box that had folded baby clothes on them now has a tape with the word bedtime written on it. He's gonna watch the tape. I pick it up, walking back into my old bedroom with a tape player that likely hasn't been used in years and I pop it in. The machine groans as it comes to life, but I watch as my mom pops up on the screen, reading the book, The Velveteen Rabbit, in a playful, almost musical manner, as if she was reading it to a child. I watch the tape with a faint smile on my lips, until another voice speaks up, higher pitched and out of frame. Is it real if it hurts? I want to know what it tastes like. Tell the rabbit to leave. My mom didn't pause her reading, almost as if she was ignoring him until she finished. When she did finish the tape, she went silent for a long moment, before she looked into the camera and then to the side, as if looking at someone out of frame. Say goodnight to your brother. There was a long pause, before a small, almost amused voice followed. Good night, Tom, and the tape ended. When I left for university, I didn't realize how badly I slept at home until I was away from it. That realization and the denial stopped me from going back home to visit, even when my parents wanted me to. It wasn't long until the calls started. He's quieter since you left. He only plays in your room now, my mother would say, as if he was real. These calls disturbed me, but I didn't have the heart to cut her off just for grief. So for years, I let it continue. That is until one night she called me, panicked, telling me he cries constantly now, and asking me to please come home and play with him. I stopped answering her calls after that. I sit on the floor in front of the tape for a long while, taking it in, before I spot something out of the corner of my eye and glance up. Nothing's there besides a yellow envelope that sticks out like a sore thumb in the dreary room. I don't know how I didn't spot it before. We are nearing 10 minutes, so I'm gonna have to make a part 2 to this one.
This story is fucking crazy. This is an extreme haunting. It's called the Union Screaming House. Ooh, creepy. So at this time, Lydia was 12, Michael was 11, and Matthew was around 9. Stephen and Lydia, his daughter, they went together to meet the house owner, Mr. Winters, who Stephen described as one of the strangest people he had ever seen. He tells Stephen to meet him at the house the next day at 2 p.m. so they can do a walkthrough and he can give Stephen the keys. And Stephen says he can't meet at that time. He has work. The earliest he can meet is at 6 p.m. Mr. Winter agrees, but states he must leave there before it gets dark. They meet the next day, and near the end of the walkthrough, when they're heading to the second floor, Mr. Winters asks Stephen, "You don't believe in ghosts, do you, Mr. LeChance?"
Red flag number 3.
Yeah. Stephen says he doesn't and asks Mr. Winters why. Mr. Winters says, "Well, I haven't heard of any such nonsense about this house having ghosts. However, not everyone can live in an old house such as this. We had better hurry. Not too much daylight left." Then, while moving into the house, Stephen notices something odd. All of the interior doors of the house have old-fashioned hook and eyelatch locks, but they're all on the outside of the doors, not the insides. So it's like locking someone in their bedroom instead of...
My door had that once.
Which one?
My mom and dad's. I had a lock on the outside.
Well, some kids do need to be locked in their bedrooms. Jessica was one of the kids that needed to be locked in her room, to be fair.
Memories.
Stephen and them go out in the backyard to do yard work. He asks his sons to go into the basement and get the garden hose for him. So Michael and Matthew head into the house. Michael comes out a few moments later, alone. They all suddenly hear Matthew screaming from inside the house. They run inside, and Matthew is pointing at the basement door, whispering, "Monster. A monster in the basement."
And this is the youngest, right?
Yep. Stephen goes to open the door to the basement stairs, and Matthew starts screaming. He tells Stephen the monster chased him up the stairs. So Stephen opens the door, goes and looks in the basement. The whole time he keeps calling up to Matthew, "No monster here, no monster here." Later that evening, Stephen and the kids go get fast food for supper. It's completely dark when they get home, and every light in the house is on. He's immediately warning the kids that they'll have to get jobs if they don't start turning the lights off. Matthew goes to the washroom, and suddenly Stephen is hearing his son screaming again. Matthew is trembling, and he says, "It came after me again." Matthew had left the bathroom door open so he could hear what his family was up to while he was going to the bathroom. Which is so cute and funny. And he looked up at the steps that go to the second floor and saw this monster rushing towards him. Stephen asks him, "What came down the steps after you?" And Matthew says, "A clown. A monster clown came after me." Stephen tries to convince Matthew that this is his imagination and that they're all safe, but he can tell that Matthew isn't buying it. That night, Stephen and the boys sleep in his bed again. Later, Stephen wakes up from a noise. Standing in the doorway that leads from the bedroom to the living room is an old man wearing a flannel shirt. He was completely still and had no expression. He was just staring at Stephen and his children. Stephen rubbed his eyes, and when he looked again...
Oh, his own eyes.
Yes.
Oh,
he wasn't like... He didn't get up, go to the man, rub his eyes.
That's what I was picturing.
You idiot. Oh my God. For the people who have Jessica's level of intelligence, Stephen rubs his own eyes. And when he looks again, the man is gone. One day, Stephen walks into the living room and feels a shock run through him. It makes every hair on his arms and his neck stand up. The living room felt super cold right after. Stephen starts to think that there must be some kind of electrical problem in the house. So he has his father come over to look.
These men always trying to rationalize everything. Like, relax, dude. Just accept it's a haunting.
Yeah, but you know what? Yeah, you're right, but also you're wrong. Because even someone who believes in ghosts and is a paranormal investigator should exclude all possible logical explanations before concluding that it's paranormal.
I just feel like if it were me, I would come to this conclusion much quicker. I would look at every possible scenario and very quickly figure out the truth.
Well, I'll tell you this.
Okay, tell me.
Stephen and his children only live in this house for a few weeks.
Shocker.
So he actually does figure it out pretty quickly.
That's actually pretty good.
But what happens in this few weeks is mental. It's a lot.
I saw something in my boyfriend's house, and ever since I have never been the same. Story time. So before we actually started seeing each other, we were just friends from school. We were in the same class, so we practically knew each other. And one thing about him is that he used to look so different, and people picked on him, people bullied him, you know. He would turn up, you know, to school with bruises. He'll be covered in bruises. When you ask him, he'll just make up a story and say, you know, he fell down the stairs, or he's clumsy, and, you know, their house dog bit him, their cat scratched him, and all sorts of excuses. And one thing about him is that he was never allowed to bring friends to his home. I knew where he lived, but no one was allowed to actually go there. And his parents were never really much around. Anyway, I started noticing pattern of him disappearing for months at a time. First time it started with days, then went to weeks, then months. And when he reappears, he looked very different, as if something had happened to him, as if he was sick, and he wouldn't even be acting like his normal self, which is quite alarming. Fast forward, he asked me out. I just didn't want to be boyfriend and girlfriend. I just wanted to be friends, but I felt sorry for him and I considered, and we started dating. As soon as we started dating, not even up to 3 months, he disappeared. I had no idea where he had gone to. I'd gone to his house, he was not there. I asked the neighbors and they said that they moved out. I rang him, his phone is not going through. I sent text message, I sent him messages on social media, to no avail. I didn't find anything. Anyway, I moved on. Then years later, I received a DM and it was from him. I didn't recognize the profile because I'm not friends with them, but he said that it's him, you know, and he is back in the area and he wants us to reconnect. I was super excited, so I decided to meet him up. When we met, he looked completely different, but also he also acted like, you know, not himself. It was as if he was someone else's in his body. Anyway, I did not really, you know, think much into it, and also I didn't want to be asking him because what I remember, he used to be quite reserved and he didn't want people asking him too many questions. Anyway, after that meetup, we decided to meet up again and again. Then he asked me out again. Of course, I was single, so I agreed. We started dating, and then one day, when we started dating, I invited him round to my house. At this point, I live on my own. He came round a couple of times, but I noticed that anytime he comes and leaves, there's always something weird happening in my apartment. Things would be moved around, things would go missing. And, you know, I didn't really want to accuse him, so I left it at that. But then it became a repeated pattern. I didn't know how to tell him, so I decided to tell him that I would come and, you know, visit him at his house. At first, he was hesitant. He didn't want me to come visiting, but then he agreed. I went there one day. When I got there, it looked very dark. There was like, you know, it was scary. I've never seen anything like it, but I guess people live differently, so I can't be judging him too much. Anyway, as time goes on, I asked him that I wanted to go use the toilet, and he showed me where it is. When I was walking towards the toilet, I could perceive this really bad, pungent smell. I've never smelled anything like it, as if it's like something that's died and is rotten. You know, that kind of smell. And then when I got into the bathroom, I noticed like voodoo dolls hanging on the wall. One of them was exactly me. I panicked. I couldn't even go to the toilet. When I turned around, he was stood right behind me. I asked him what these are, and he said, oh, it's just a hobby thing, you know, I should pay no mind to it. It's nothing harmful, you know. So I just thought, okay, whatever he says, that's what it is. Anyway, I left, and then we were sat back in the living room talking, and I could hear banging sounds and voices coming from his basement. It was at this point that alarm bell started ringing. I was super uncomfortable, and I told him that I needed to go back home. You know, I've got work the next day and I'm really tired, although I didn't. He said okay, and then he walked me to my car. When I got there, he shouted my name and he said, oh, you know, wait, I've got something for you. He went inside and brought me this bag. It looked really weird. I don't know what was inside there, but he said it's a gift for me. I shouldn't open it until I get back home. I took the gift and then he kissed me goodbye. So I got in my car, and as I was driving, I could feel the presence in my car. I was so uneasy. I stopped. I got out and I checked everywhere in my car. Nothing. When I carried on driving, it was as if someone was looking at me. Someone was staring at me. It was as if some presence was in my car. And then I looked at my rear view mirror and I saw a shadow. It was at this point I knew there was something wrong. I got home, I grabbed my stuff, the gift that he gave me, and I ran inside. Tell me why, ever since, I took that gift home. I've been experiencing weird things in my own house. I've moved and things are still happening. I caught complete contact with him and I chucked out his gift. But then these things stop. People, what do you think it was that was banging in his basement and the voices that I was hearing in his basement? But this is very weird and freaky. People, be careful.
A follower emailed me this story a few days ago, and it's one of those ones that will actually make you stop and think and be like, what the hell just happened? Now, she swears that this happened when she was 9 years old, and to this day, neither her nor her younger brother can fully explain what happened that night. Now, the email came from a woman named Marissa, and she wrote that when she was 9, her little brother Ethan was about 6 years old at the time. Their family lived in an older 2-story house in New Mexico. And according to her parents, strange things happened all the time there. Doors would slowly open on their own. Footsteps could be heard all over the house. Footsteps upstairs when everyone's downstairs, and the dog refusing to go anywhere near a particular hallway inside the home after dark. Things like that. But the kids never really believed that the house was haunted until one night. Now, Marissa and Ethan shared a bedroom together for a little bit, and their beds sat on opposite sides of the room with a small dresser in between them. And it was the middle of summer, and their parents had left the bedroom door cracked open so the hallway light could get into the room and they wouldn't be scared, right? They were at that age. Now, sometime after midnight, Marissa says that she started having the most vivid nightmare of her life. And she wasn't standing anywhere in particular. She wasn't in her parents' bedroom. She was surrounded by complete darkness, she said. And it was the kind where, not even if you close your eyes, that doesn't even compare. It's the kind where it feels endless, like a void. Like there isn't a floor beneath you. And then all of a sudden, she started hearing voices. And at first, they were just whispers overlapping one another, so she couldn't really make out the words, but they sounded wrong, low, and raspy, almost excited. And then one voice became very clear, and it said, "Let's grab her feet." And the other voice answered immediately saying, "No, enough of her." Then there was a pause, and then in a very calm, creepy voice, it said, "Let's grab the little one." Now, the second that those words were uttered, Marissa says that she snapped up and woke up. And before she even had time to really even sit up and process, her 6-year-old brother Ethan exploded into this terrifying scream, screaming, crying at the top of his lungs. And he was kicking violently under the blankets and yelling, and he was screaming out loud, "He's grabbing me, he's grabbing my legs, please make him stop," over and over. Now, their parents came running into the bedroom, and they turned on every light, and they searched under both of the beds, the closet, everywhere. And there was nothing, of course. But Ethan wouldn't calm down, and he kept pointing toward the foot of his bed, absolutely insisting that someone had been pulling on his ankles just moments before. Now, their dad assumed that it was maybe a bad dream, and Marissa says no one had ever told Ethan about her nightmare, not even her. And she didn't tell anybody what she had heard only moments before he started screaming, crying. Now, years later, after they were adults, she had asked her brother if he remembered that night, and he looked at her without, hesitation or skipping a beat, and he's like, "Yeah, I remember someone standing at the end of my bed, grabbing my feet." And neither of them has ever been able to explain how she heard those voices right before he woke up screaming. So, was it nothing more than a nightmare, or did she hear something that maybe she was never supposed to hear? Let me know what you guys think in the comments.
I found terrifying birthday cards after my mother passed. Welcome to the Creepy Cozy Cottage, where creepy and cozy meet. So grab a blanket and get cozy, because it's creepy cozy time at the Creepy Cozy Cottage. Say that 10 times. My mother kept every birthday card I ever gave her. I didn't know that until after she'd passed. The hospital sent her belongings home in a cardboard box. Most of it sat unopened for months before I finally started sorting through it. Near the bottom was a bundle of birthday cards tied together with a faded ribbon. Every card I'd ever given her was there. Construction paper cards from elementary school, store-bought cards from my teenage years, even terrible handmade one I'd thrown together the night before her birthday when I realized I'd forgotten to buy a gift. At first, I was just reading through them for the memories. Then I noticed something strange. Inside every card, my mother had handwritten the date she received it. Beneath the date was a number. The first card said 14, the next said 15, then 16. The numbers kept increasing every year. What bothered me was that they were always 1 year ahead of my actual age. When I reached my 18th birthday card, the number written inside wasn't 18, it was 19. A few cards also contained short notes, still the same. Voice unchanged. Remembers the dog. They weren't messages to me. They looked like reminders she'd written for herself. I called my aunt that night. The moment I mentioned the notes, she stopped talking. After a long silence, she asked whether I remembered getting lost during a family camping trip when I was 6. I remember the story because I'd heard it my entire life. I wandered into the woods, the adults panicked, search teams were organized, a police officer showed up. A few hours later, I walked back out. Everyone always treated it like it was a funny family story. My aunt didn't. She told me my mother never laughed about it. Then she said something that made me drive to her house the next morning. According to my aunt, my mother believed something followed me out of those woods. She wouldn't explain farther. I'd spent the next few weeks digging through old photographs and notebooks. That's when things started getting uncomfortable. My mother's notes weren't about me acting strangely. They were about the things she claimed happened around me. One entry described hearing footsteps outside my bedroom window every night for a month. Another described finding muddy footprints on the ceiling of our back porch after a thunderstorm. Most disturbing entries all mentioned the same thing. A tall figure standing just beyond the tree line whenever the family went outdoors. Nobody else ever reported seeing it. My mother wrote about it for years. I eventually found the notebook she'd been using during the months after the camping trip. Most of the pages were ordinary, grocery lists, phone numbers, appointment reminders. Then the writing changed. She described seeing someone standing between the trees while search teams looked for me. At first, she thought it was another volunteer. Then she realized it never moved. According to her, it remained exactly in the same spot for hours. The final entry about the woods were written the day after I came home. She claimed she saw the same figure standing behind our house that night. She wrote that it stayed there until sunrise. The last birthday card in the box was dated 6 months before she passed. The number written beneath the date was 32, even though I was only 31. Underneath, she'd written the final note, "Still here." I spent a long time trying to figure out what she meant. Last week, I found a photograph taken during that camping trip. I'd never seen it before. The picture showed a group of volunteers searching the woods. My mother had circled something near the edge of the frame. At first, I thought it was a tree. Then I zoomed in. Someone was standing between the trunks, watching the search. The timestamp on the photo was 2 hours before I was found. What bothers me isn't that the figure is there. What bothers me is that it's wearing the same jacket I was wearing when I walked out of the woods. Let me know your thoughts, and if you have any scary stories of your own you'd like me to read, just send me a DM.
The police told me that somebody had been calling them from my house for weeks, but I live alone. I woke up to super loud banging on my front door, and when I answered it, it was 2 police officers. So one of them asked if somebody else was in the house, and I told them no, I live alone, and they said that they have received 3 separate 911 calls from this house. And I said that's crazy because I haven't called them, and so they asked if they could come inside to see if anybody else was in the home that needed help. First, I did try to tell them that they must have the wrong home, but they actually did show me the address on their screen, and it was my house. Obviously, I agreed, and I let them search my home. They searched every single room decently thoroughly, and then they asked me if anything seemed off or different in my home or if things had moved. And I told them occasionally there will be a cabinet in my kitchen open that I don't remember opening, but obviously I'm human, I could have totally forgotten. Or I would leave a light on, something like that. They said, okay, well, if you notice anything else or if anything's off, here's my card, give us a call. That whole situation made me feel a little unsettled, so I did actually go out and buy some security cameras. I set one up that was facing towards my front porch, and then I got another one and I set it up in my kitchen, and I would check it every single morning to see if something weird would happen, and there wasn't anything. Until the 8th night came around. I woke up around 3 a.m. I checked my phone and it sent me a motion alert, so I went and I looked into the footage. I didn't see anybody in my kitchen, and I just kind of kept replaying it to see why it kept blinking at me. And if you looked really close, there is half a second that the footage actually was frozen.
And then when it came back, one of the kitchen chairs was just slightly moved. Like, you would have to really be looking to notice that it moved. But nobody was in the frame. So that same day, it was around the evening time, and I actually decided to check my attic. And it was the access door was in my hallway. So I went to my hallway, I pulled it down. Literally, I've never been up there in the 3 years that I've lived here. Like, so much insulation literally fell down. I climbed up there, and it looked empty at first, and then I noticed that there was a big thing of plywood, and it was almost like, it was at the length where it would be a walkway. And then at the end of it, you saw a water bottle, and you saw a prepaid cell phone. Now, this could have been here before I moved in, and I just didn't know, or there was somebody that was creeping up in my attic. So I took the phone into the police, and after a couple of days, they said that they got into it because it was dead, and they saw the call history, and they said that every single call that went out to them was coming from this phone, and that the last call actually happened the day that I went into the attic. I moved out into my parents' house before the investigation was even over, and a few months later it was rented out to a new family, and then 6 months later I got a call from the officers. He said that the new tenants have called them a couple times reporting that there are footsteps in their ceiling around 3 a.m. And I said, okay, well, have you checked it again? And they said, yeah, we checked it again. We didn't find anything, but there is something that we didn't tell you before. We forgot to tell you detail. When the person would call, it was never somebody speaking. It was always just kind of breathing. Then at the end of every single phone call, they ended it the same way every single time. It was before the phone would disconnect. They would say my full name. So obviously whoever or whatever is living up there did know who I was and knew my identity. I don't know if they know where I live now, but I hope that they don't do the same thing to the new tenants.
There's one word you should never say. Absolutely never ever say the word skinwalker. Because when you say this word, you are sending up a beacon to say, hey, I'm here. And you are inviting this thing, right, to come after you. Even thinking about it, even watching videos about it, can bring it about. And that's why a lot of Native American cultures, if you ask them questions about it, they don't talk about it at all. They want to forget about it, that even happened. I've heard that the reason it doesn't like you to say that word is because you are essentially calling it what it is. And by acknowledging and saying its name, you are, right, telling it that it is evil, right? I heard this story. There was a man, and he was driving down this highway one night. Now, he didn't believe in any kind of legend or lore. And so he's on the phone with a friend, and he's talking to him, and he mentions the word. And his friend's like, oh, no, man, you're not supposed to say that. Don't you know that? And he's like, oh, man, that's just a myth. That's not true. And as he's driving down this road, he slams on his brakes because he sees something on the side of the road, kind of going out into the road. When he looks closely, he sees it's some kind of coyote. And he said as he got a better look at the coyote, he could see that it had yellow eyes. So that kind of freaked him out a little bit, and he kind of just drives around this thing. And he starts slowly watching it in its mirror to see what it does. Well, it starts running after his car, and he starts speeding, and he's going as fast as he can. And this thing is chasing him and keeping up with his vehicle. Well, he thinks he's finally lost it because he doesn't see it anymore. And he thinks, oh, it's gone. I'm all right. Well, when he makes it home, he gets out of his car and he notices in the woods by his house that there's a coyote moving around in the woods. This story comes out of Missouri. There was this man named Phil, and he said this one weekend, him and his wife decided to go camping in the Ozarks. They had this area that they would go to, which was a friend's property, and they had kind of set up this cleared area where they could camp for the weekend. So they go there, they set up their tents and everything, and he's enjoying his time with his wife. Well, he said later that night they go to bed and they are in their tent when he just has this really bad dream. And in the dream, there is something running through the woods and it's chasing him. And he said all of a sudden this thing turns and it starts going after his wife. And then boom, he wakes up. And he said when he woke up, he looked over and his wife was gone. She wasn't in the tent. So he starts freaking out, what's going on? Where's my wife? So he got up and goes outside of the tent, and he starts yelling for his wife. She's not responding. So he goes off in the woods, and he's looking around for her, yelling her name. And then in the corner of his eye, he sees something moving in the woods. So he goes in that direction, and there's his wife. And she's just standing in the woods, like looking up at the sky. And so Philip is like, hey, what are you doing out in the woods? Like, you had me scared. Like, I thought something happened to you. And she's like, oh, everything's okay, honey. I was just outside catching some fresh air. And he's like, okay. Well, do you want to come back to bed? She said, yeah. So they go back to the tent and they go to sleep. And the rest of the camping trip, right, is fine. They go back home. Well, he said ever since that night, his wife was just kind of different. Like, something was off about her, and he couldn't really explain it, but there was a slight change in her voice and a slight change in kind of her personality and her mannerisms. And every so often, she would look at him and give him kind of this weird smile, and it just made him feel very uncomfortable. Well, he said one night, him and his wife, they go to bed, and they're just laying in the bed. And he said all of a sudden, his wife, her voice, like, changed. And she started saying, like, I'm going to get you, Phil, I'm going to get you. And he's like, what are you talking about? And she's like, I'm going to get you. I'm taking you back to the woods. And he's like, what's going on? And he said all of a sudden, she jumped on top of him and started holding him down. And she was shaking him and up in his face, like, yelling all kinds of swear words at him. And he said, like, he couldn't figure out how she had this much strength, because she normally wasn't, like, a very strong person, but she was fully holding him down. He couldn't get up out of bed. And he said all of a sudden, like, he pushed her and she kind of, like, fell backwards onto the bed. And he said the next thing he knows, he sees this light leave her body and then go out the hallway. He hears the front door open and then close. And this wind kind of just blew through the house. And then he said everything was silent. And his wife was like, what's going on, honey? And she was like normal again. And she was completely confused about what had happened, and she couldn't remember anything up to that point when they had went on the camping trip. And he felt like something had taken over his wife.
Do I think Graceland's haunted? Yeah, I do. But I don't think Elvis is the one that haunts it. Lip gloss on so I can run this mouth. Now focus. Scary story time, Fright Night Files. This photo was taken in the TV room at Graceland, and it appears to have 3 ghosts in it. A man holding a little girl, and then a woman behind the original poster over here. Now, she said that she was in the TV room. There's no artwork in the TV room, just a lightning bolt. There's no pictures or anything like that. Across from where she was standing, there's 3 TVs. It's a very basic room, but you can see a man and a little girl and then a woman over on this side. She said that this was a live photo. There was no one in the room with her when she took this photo, but you can see them walk in. She has the proof of that on her page. But let me tell you, I think these two, Elvis and Lisa Marie, I think that's a residual haunt, and I think Gladys is an active haunt. Why do I think Gladys is an active haunt? Because she was obsessed with Elvis. She was the first to be obsessed with him, and he felt the same towards her. She was very much the OG boy mom. Think of the show Smothered or something times 10. That was Gladys Presley. She had her own language with Elvis. They slept in the same bed until his teen years. She thought the world of him, and he in turn thought the world of her. Even Priscilla said that Gladys was Elvis's one true love. Now, once Gladys passed away, Elvis did not take it well. He never really recovered. Things went south. It was a whole big bad ordeal. And I think that she still haunts the house. I think he doesn't. And I think that's why you see him here holding Lisa Marie, because that is just a residual ghost, and a residual ghost is kind of like a haunting. It's an imprint. Think of it as like a record that just plays on a loop. Like if you're watching a DVD in your home, everything's actually happening in your house, but it's not really there. It's just a memory. People believe that residual energy is good, positive. It can be bad, but if intense emotion is felt in a place, then it can hold a memory. And Elvis was the most intense person around. He felt everything, the highs, the lows, all of the stuff. So it only makes sense. And then when you add in all of the visitors, it's like 600,000 people a year come there. They all have another intense emotion. It just holds the residual imprint there and makes it stronger. And if you want to know more about this and why I think that, you can listen to my latest podcast episode.
For a year and a half, nothing strange ever happened in our house. Then overnight, everything changed. Scary story time. I grew up in the Netherlands, and when I was about 5 years old, my family moved into a fairly new house. For the first year and a half, nothing unusual happened. Then almost overnight, everything changed. It started with strange dreams. I kept dreaming that someone was standing outside my attic bedroom, watching me through the doorway. My mom always told me I just had an overactive imagination. Then every morning, we'd find the washing machine door wide open with clothes scattered all over the landing outside my room. At night, my mom started hearing footsteps coming from the attic. Every time she checked, I was in bed asleep. One night, she awoke and found me downstairs, standing in front of the TV, staring at static without saying a word. Looking back, I was probably sleepwalking, but after that, things became much worse. The footsteps got louder. My parents said it sounded like someone running up and down the stairs in the middle of the night. Then doors throughout the house started opening and closing on their own. The worst night happened while both of my parents were awake in bed. They heard the footsteps again. Then their bedroom door slowly opened and slammed shut. It opened again, slammed shut again. My parents ran upstairs, grabbed me from my attic bedroom and my little sister from hers, brought us back into their room, and all four of us watched the bedroom door repeatedly swing open and slam shut, while the footsteps continued racing up and down the stairs. My dad has always been an incredibly skeptical person. He has never believed in ghosts or anything paranormal. But even now, more than 25 years later, he still talks about that night. Eventually, my mom contacted someone who investigated paranormal activity. They walked through the house carrying what I remember as a triangular device and told my parents that there was a strange energy centered around the attic where my bedroom was. They performed some kind of cleansing, and from that day forward, everything stopped. The footsteps, the doors, the washing machine, every single thing. Nothing like that has ever happened again. I still don't know what it was, but I never forgot it. And that's the end of the story. So I believe all the stories that I've read on my page so far have only been single-handed experiences, whether it was paranormal or they went through something, saw something, whatever the case may be. I believe, if memory serves me well, that today's story and yesterday's story have been the first stories that I've read on my page so far, where multiple people have experienced the same thing. Having multiple people experience the same thing at the same time, I believe does add quite a few layers of credibility to the story. However, I did find this on Reddit under the Ghost Stories subreddit, so everything that we read online, take it with a grain of salt. But I think if multiple people experience the same thing, it's kind of hard to explain it away. So obviously in this story, the dad, for some reason, gets everyone and his children into their bedroom instead of out of the house. So they continue experiencing the paranormal activity, watching the door open and close, open and close. And so everyone saw that. Everyone that is in the house is in that room. You can't explain that away. You could try, but we all saw the same thing. Whatever's happening is not normal, right? And so when I read that story, I was like, Guy, are you serious? Instead of taking everybody out of the house, you go back into your room. Survival skills of a wet napkin, I swear. But anyways, have you guys ever experienced anything creepy, scary, paranormal, or seen anything in multiples where it was more than one person, not just you alone? Again, I just think sharing something or experiencing something with multiple people just kind of gives you that satisfaction of okay, whatever I saw or experienced, as scary as it was, I wasn't alone, and we all saw the same thing, so it had to have happened. So yeah, let me know in the comments if you have ever experienced anything like that. I'd love to read it.
We need to talk about the kid. That is what Mom said to Dad. Billy was sitting right in between his mother and father, thinking that it was unusual for Mom to be talking in such a monotonous tone. He doesn't say a word because he has learned over the years that it is not a wise choice to talk while Mom and Dad are talking. In fact, not to talk at all is the only wise choice for Billy in this household. What? Dad expresses his lack of patience in just one word. He's always been very good at expressing anger, sometimes by words, sometimes with fists, seasoned with a whip or two. Occasionally by a pair of Oxfords if Dad miraculously gets a job interview that day. Billy thinks to himself and almost bursts into laughter. It's an unusual sense of humor for a 16-year-old boy to have, but Billy's life is never usual, and he's also been through a lot more than a 16-year-old should have. Don't butt me. If you'd spent more time with the kid, I wouldn't have been called to the principal's office again. Oh, so it's my fault now that the kid is running around breaking stuff, hurting other students. Dad's voice getting louder and louder with every word. Billy wants to tell him that his name is Billy and not the kid, but he restrains his urge to avoid the beating he will get if he opens his mouth. He forgets that he won't be beaten again. Not anymore. Of course it's your fault. I'm always the one that puts food on the table. What have you done for this family? Normally, Dad would fire back with another insult and then begin to beat up Mom. Just another Wednesday night in Billy's home. But that is not happening because Billy is tired of role-playing now. He withdraws his hands from his parents' cold lifts. His thumb is sore from arching up and down constantly, trying to make their mouths move. Billy rests back in his chair and gazes at what is in front of him as if he is looking at the greatest piece of art that he has ever seen before. His parents lie in their chairs with their arms draping like broken branches towards the ground. There are little streams of dried blood running down his dad's left arm from the gash in his neck, cut open earlier by a steak knife by Billy. Mom doesn't have much blood in her body because the fork is still buried deep in her neck. For the first time in his life, Billy feels relieved. He feels free, and he decides to do something only grown-ups are allowed to do in his house. He laughs.
Series of spooky stories except for its creepy kids. This comment that I'm responding to, that is creepy. When my daughter was around 2, I asked her what her name was, being silly. She said Birdie. No, wait, this time it's Aria. I asked, was Birdie your old name? She said, yes, I was an old lady, then I was a baby. She also said that she was a tree with pretty flowers once, a long time ago. Wow. I lived alone with my 2-year-old at the time. We were getting ready for bed, and while walking back from the bathroom to bed, he stopped in his tracks, stared towards the dark kitchen, pointed and said, who is that? Who is who? I looked back to no one. I said, who? And he pointed behind me and said, him. We left that house so fast, I went back to my baby daddy. My son was like 2 or 3 at the time. I woke up in the middle of the night to him fidgeting and talking. He was in my bed. I asked him who he was talking to, half asleep. He said, Dad. I looked behind me and his dad was asleep. I asked, where's Dad? He pointed to the corner of my room, which very obviously wasn't his dad. I told him his dad was asleep and to go back to bed. I've seen black shadows in that corner before and since. He's 7 now. No exorcisms? No priests? I was told this story by my son's late aunt. My son was around 3 or 4 and was sitting at the breakfast bar eating his dinner. His aunt was sitting behind him at the dining room table. She and his grandma said that they heard my son say, that's Auntie's prize. You can't have it. His aunt left her rosary sitting on the counter. His aunt and grandma heard him say this more than once. When his grandma asked him who he was talking to, he pointed and said, that man over there. He wants Auntie's prize, and I told him no, that he can't have it. His grandma asked my son if he would like the man to leave, and my son said yes. So she told that man that he was scaring her grandson and that he had to leave. They both said that my son watched the man leave. To take his mind off the man, his grandma showed him family photos. All of a sudden, my son pointed and said, that's the man who wants Auntie's prize. The man was his great-grandfather, and he made that one-time appearance the night before what would have been his birthday. It was actually me that was the creepy child. My mom had told me that I always played in my room by myself, but my room was always a few degrees colder than the rest of the house. She was in her room talking on the phone one day, and I came running in there, yelling, Mama, Mama, don't let it get me. When she asked who, she said all of the color drained from my face, and I started shaking and just pointing to the air. She noped the fuck out of there. My grandmother came over with holy water and blessed the house, but we moved. My mom was not one to mess around with spirits. Good for her. The I'm buried there, which was in the last video. Apparently, I used to say that to my mom while passing cemeteries. I do remember having a dream of crossing a rope bridge on a horse, which didn't end well. That must have been fun for my mom. When my daughter was a toddler, when we passed the cemetery, she would tell me that she saw people standing out there. Often, she would say that she saw Jesus or Mary. My son stopped sleeping in his room when he was like 3 because some man was saying his name mean, so he shut his door at night and he slept in my room. A few months ago, my 6-year-old son started manically writing McKenna
the name of my deceased sister. He's delayed, and I asked what he was spelling and where he heard that from. He said, "We're just coloring, Mom." I asked who. He said, "McKenna, right there in front of you. Don't you see her? She looks like you and Abby, other sister. Same long brown hair, not like Nat and Victoria, other siblings with different hair. She died as a baby over 20 years ago." He also told me a lot of people were at our house that night, including his grandpa, who passed a few years back. He says that McKenna is always here. I don't know if that's reassuring or terrifying. When my third daughter was around 4, she brought me some drawings she did. They were interlocking rings and wings with eyes. I asked her what it was, and she said God's babies. I looked up biblically accurate angels, and she was drawing thrones and seraphim. We're not church-going people. She's 8 now and still calls angels God's babies. Out of the blue, my daughter asked me, "Mom, would you be mad if I murdered you?" "Why? Are you thinking about it?" Well, considering I wouldn't be here to be mad, I guess not. She was 14 and apparently had watched her first true crime documentary. Lord, starting off young. Do we want a part 3?
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. Since I was young, my family believed I was sensitive to things that most people weren't. I understand how strange that might sound to people, but I hope that to some that it won't, and that someone out there has had maybe a similar experience. This belief started because when I was a child, I told my family that I had seen my great-great-grandfather. I had seen him leisurely standing inside my grandmother's childhood home. The problem was I had never met the man. He had died long before I was born. Yet when I was questioned about what I was seeing, I described him perfectly. The clothes he wore, the way he looked, and apparently even where he was standing. When I saw him, everything checked out. As I got older, strange things occasionally happened around me, but nothing that truly terrified me. Not until my 16th birthday, at least. The night of my birthday, I had one of the most vivid dreams I've ever experienced. Even calling it a dream, though, doesn't feel right to me. It felt very real. I remember standing in some place that looked empty and endless. The sky was dark, and there was just miles and miles of land all around me, like standing in the middle of a desert almost. And scattered all around me were bodies, at least 100, just lying there motionless on the ground. As I looked around, that's when I saw him. The only one standing among them was a man, and I got this overwhelming feeling that he'd been watching me. Immediately, I knew he wasn't human. I knew that there was something deeply wrong with him, something evil. He slowly approached me, and then he spoke. He started by telling me his name, and maybe it's irrational, or maybe to this day I'm still fearful of him, but I've never repeated that name out loud, ever. Some part of me believes that speaking it would invite something back into my life that I don't want to return. When I woke up, I was shaking, my heart was racing, and I immediately went to my mother and told her what had happened. She only listened and had only a few words of advice. She told me that I needed to be careful. According to her, some people just naturally attract spiritual things, both good and bad. And at the time, I didn't know what to think. Part of me wanted to believe that it was just a nightmare, nothing more. The other part wasn't so sure. The next morning, my father woke me up very early. The sun had only barely started to peek over the horizon. He needed a ride to work, and so I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and we went on our way. I was understandably still tired from the night before, still unsettled from the dream, and on the way back home, something changed. Everything around me went completely quiet. I could no longer hear the AC through the vents. The radio I had playing, the sound of the street beneath the tires, it was all gone. I felt like the world had changed around me, like I had been plunged underwater almost. In that moment, I remember gripping the steering wheel tighter and trying to convince myself that what was happening to me wasn't actually happening. I kept repeating the same thought to myself over and over and over again. Whatever this was, I'm stronger than it. Whatever it is, I'm not afraid. When I finally got back home, it was around 5 in the morning. The sun was starting to rise steadily now, and I tried to lay down to get a few more hours of sleep, but no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't. I couldn't stop replaying the dream. That morning, the man I convinced myself that a good run would clear my head and probably help me sleep better later on. So I changed, grabbed my dog, and headed toward a canal near my parents' house. For a little while, everything felt normal again. Until I saw him. Standing near the canal, maybe 15 feet away, a man in a suit, completely motionless, and I recognized him. It was the man from my dream, except it couldn't be him. It wasn't possible. Dreams don't step into reality, but before I could even react, my dog stopped. Completely frozen, locked up, and then so did I. And as we stood there, unable to use our bodies, he moved. He didn't walk towards us. He didn't run. I would have even accepted a glide from this man, but not even that. 1 second he was standing by the canal, and the next he was right in front of me. Face to face now, only inches between us. Before I could react, he placed his hand directly on my chest. The pain was immediate. A burning sensation ran through my body. I tried to pull away. I tried to fight, but I couldn't move. My body wasn't mine anymore. And close up like this, I could finally see his face. He wasn't human. His features were too pronounced. His hair was too dark, his jaw was too sharp, and his eyes were completely black. I remember hearing him speak, and his voice was strange, like a lot of voices layered together. And he kept repeating the same thing, that I belonged to him, that nobody could take me away, that nobody could touch me. And the burning grew worse. My vision started fading. I could feel myself losing consciousness. I thought I was dying. Then something touched my back. A hand. I knew it was. I could feel the fingers, and the touch was firm and gentle. A bright flash of light exploded around me, and for one terrifying second, I genuinely thought I had died. But in almost the same instant, the light vanished, the burning stopped, and the pressure on my back disappeared. When I came to, the man was gone. The canal was empty, and the morning was quiet again. My dog suddenly sprang back to life, barking frantically and pulling at her leash. I didn't wait around. I ran the entire way home, slammed the door behind me, locked every lock, and immediately called my mother. Crying and shaking, I tried to explain what had just happened. And after that call, within a short amount of time, my grandmother arrived at my house, and with her came a priest. So I recounted the story to them, everything that had happened within the last 12 hours, the dream, the silence, the canal, the man, the burning, and the light. And when I finished, the priest sat quietly for a moment before speaking. He believed something had intervened that morning, something divine, something that stepped in before whatever I encountered could finish what it had started. After that day, I never saw the man again. I never had another dream about him. I never felt that presence. Almost as if whatever happened near that canal had just ended there. Still though, so many years later, I find myself thinking about the hand at my back, wondering who or what was there that day, and being thankful that they arrived just in time.
So I have a Jeepers Creepers story time. This is just in case you need a reminder of who Jeepers Creepers is. This story was submitted by Alejandra. I went ahead and tagged her down below. So Alejandra is originally from California. A few years ago, her mom, her sister, her brother-in-law, and a family friend were on a road trip all the way to Washington. The family friend was driving while her mom was in the passenger seat, and both her sister and brother-in-law were in the back seat sleeping. When out of nowhere, Alejandra's mom and the family friend sees this man standing on the side of the road. And I mean, this man is tall. Too tall to even be human. She remembers how small his head was. And just as he's standing there, he opens up his wings as if he's getting ready to fly off. At this point, Alejandra's mom screams, which ends up waking up Alejandra's sister and brother-in-law who were asleep in the back seat. They both wake up just in time to see the same creature. None of them could believe what they had just witnessed. Once they arrived to Washington, the family friend ended up staying in Washington. On the way back, it was Alejandra's sister who was driving with her brother-in-law right next to her and Alejandra's mom in the back seat. They were talking about the creature that they had witnessed on their way there and were trying to figure out a rational reason as to what they witnessed. At this point, Alejandra's mom ends up asking her brother-in-law for a trash bag. All three of them took their eyes off the road for some strange reason, looking for this trash bag. when the car swerves to the right. Alejandra's sister tried her best to get the car back on track, but it started spinning all the way onto the side of the road, right into an incoming truck that was getting ready to crash right into them. When out of nowhere, a wave of sand came and covered up the whole car. They all yelled, thinking that they were getting ready to die. When they opened up their eyes again, they realized that there was no incoming truck and no explanation as to where the sand came from or where it went. They ended up making their way home. A couple days later, Alejandra's brother-in-law's sister called him and asked if he was okay, or if he had been sick, or if had anything happened to him. Him completely forgetting about their encounter that they had on their way to Washington, told her that everything was fine. His sister then tells him that a couple days before, she was cleaning the bathroom when she heard her father's voice, who had passed away, telling her, "Dile a Tommy que no vaya a ese viaje." Tell Tommy not to go on that trip. So they believe that the reason why they weren't seriously hurt when they had this close encounter was because Tommy's father kept them safe from not just this, but from...
This man is one of the worst serial killers in U.S. history, and a lot of people don't know about him. This is the story of David Parker Ray, also known as the Toy Box Killer. He's also responsible for one of the most disturbing audio recordings in history, and we'll talk more about that later. Reminder that I tell a lot of dark true crime stories on this channel, so viewer discretion is advised, but follow along if you want to hear more. So this is David Parker Ray. He was born November 6th, 1939. He was raised by his grandfather in a cruel, often strict household. His father was horrible. His father's presence was sporadic during his childhood, but when he was there, he was usually violent and drunk. His father also had the strange idea to provide young David Parker Ray with adult magazines, which all kind of had leather and chain themes, which seemed to shape and darkly influence his fantasies and crimes as he got older. Apparently he was very shy and had a hard time talking to girls, so he was bullied relentlessly for it, and his troubled childhood carried into his adult years. He was married and divorced 4 times, had 2 children, and was really incapable of maintaining a steady relationship with anyone. He was also part of the U.S. Army briefly and worked as a mechanic, but he was honorably discharged. Well, let's talk about his nickname, which is the Toy Box Killer. And these are not Fisher-Price toys we're talking about. David Parker Ray was a sadist, and he took quite a bit of pleasure in the mistreatment and violence towards women. He put $100,000 into this semi-truck trailer to trick it out into a torture chamber that he nicknamed the Toy Box. His modus operandi would be to abduct 4 to 5 women a year. He would often target women of the evening and runaways, and he would hold them captive in this trailer for 2 to 3 months at a time. And during this period, these women were subject to abject terror and torture at the hands of this man. And he'd often use surgical instruments. Sometimes he would involve his friends, his wife, or even his dog. Then he would dose his victims with barbiturates in an attempt to erase their memory of what had happened, and leave them on the side of the road if he hadn't already taken their life. The amount of victims that he had remains unclear, but he had a criminal career that spanned 5 decades. And investigators believe that he assaulted or unalived at least 60 people. But they haven't been able to locate any remains, and he refused to release that information. By the end of his criminal career, he was using his girlfriend and his daughter to help lure victims in. His girlfriend's name was Cindy Hendy, who is actually on the run from the police for grand theft and drug charges. But they bonded over their shared affinity for violence. So let's talk about one of the most disturbing audio recordings in history that this man made. Serial killer David Parker Ray would use his daughter or his girlfriend to lure female victims into his trailer that he nicknamed the Toy Box. And he'd dose them so they passed out. And when they regained consciousness, they were played a tape. The trailer had about $100,000 worth of, torture devices in it. But the tape was really just a method of psychological torture. The recording is his voice, and he's telling women what to expect, how to behave, and all of the terrible things that are going to happen to him over the next however many days, weeks, months they were going to be there. The tape has been made available to the public, and a quick Google search will pull it up, but it's an incredibly difficult thing to listen to, and this is the transcript, so you can pause to read. But I'm warning you, it is brutal. So David Parker Ray was caught in 1999, and this is how. This is Cynthia Vigil, and she was abducted by David Parker Ray and his girlfriend Cindy Hendy, and she was taken to the trailer and tortured. And after 3 days of captivity, she was actually able to escape. She had waited until David Parker Ray went to work. Then she unlocked her chains because he left the keys on a nearby table. Then she hit his girlfriend, who was supervising her, over the head with a lamp. And when she escaped, she was wearing nothing but an iron collar. She ran down the road seeking help, where a nearby homeowner took her in, called the police, and they promptly arrested David Parker Ray and his girlfriend, Cindy Hendy. When the story became public, another victim came forward with a similar account of something that had happened at the hand of David Parker Ray. And police found another victim alive based off of pictures that he had in his house. David Parker Ray's trial was actually kind of a shit show. A judge that decided that the 3 victims couldn't be in a case together, and different evidence applied to different cases. One of the defendants, Angelica Montano, actually passed away during the trial from an overdose. And his first trial ended in a mistrial because the jury couldn't decide on a verdict, because not all of them were persuaded that the testifying victims were held against their will. So they had another trial, and just a few days into it, the judge passed away. His next trial wasn't until the next year, and he had a new judge who wasn't as lenient. He pleaded guilty to 12 criminal counts and was sentenced to 223 years in prison. However, he passed away 3 years later from a heart attack when he was 62. With him gone, the case became a dead end, and the case was made public in 2002 so more survivors could come forward.
A Michigan doctor was sentenced to 35 to 60 years in prison for committing some of the most disturbing crimes against some of the most vulnerable victims. It was his own wife who in June of 2024 filed for divorce on top of filing for a personal protection order. The petition she submitted contained information that would within weeks set off one of the most disturbing criminal investigations in Oakland County history. She alleged that her husband had been secretly recording her inside of their own home since 2019 with secret cameras installed in bathrooms, in showers, in bedrooms, in spaces where any person would think that they had privacy. Then sometimes in the weeks that followed, she discovered something worse. Among the recording devices and memory cards that she discovered hidden inside of their own home, she found footage that went far beyond their own house. There were videos from outside the home, videos from changing rooms, public bathrooms, videos of other females, from toddlers to grown women, some being his own patients. Videos of him committing the most heinous crimes, and it felt like everything that she was discovering was taking things from bad to worse.
Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
But what she found was nothing short of repulsive. And she did the right thing because she took the evidence straight to the Oakland County Sheriff's Office, leading then to investigators opening up a formal criminal investigation into Dr. Omer Jaj in August of 2024. What they were about to find would take months to fully process and would ultimately reveal a trusted doctor who had been systematically preying on vulnerable people in their most private and vulnerable moments for at least 6 years. Omer Jaj was born in India and came to the United States in 2011 on a work visa to complete a medical internship in Michigan. He completed his residency at a hospital in Detroit and then relocated to Alabama before then returning to Oakland County in 2018 to build his internal medical practice. His Michigan medical license was issued in September of 2018 and remained valid up until the findings of the investigation into him. On the surface, however, he managed to create this life, put on this persona of a well-respected doctor. He was a contracted physician with privileges at multiple major hospitals, a homeowner in Rochester Hills, a husband, and a father. He had 2 sons with his wife, and the family seemed, from the outside looking in, like a stable, happy family. Before his arrest, he had no criminal history and no previous complaints on record, and exactly that is what made him so dangerous, because there was absolutely nothing in his professional nor personal history that would have raised any red flags. 6 days after investigators opened up the investigation, Dr. Omer Jaj was arrested. Officers walked up to his driveway where they found his little son, a little boy, outside. They asked Omer to step outside, and then they arrested him on the spot. The initial charges, 10 counts, stemmed from recordings of children and women taken without their knowledge at the Goldfish Swim School in Rochester Hills.
Hills, a facility that he frequently visited with his family because it turns out one of his favorite things to do was hide inside of a bathroom stall, wait for moms, grandmothers, aunts, adults, anyone really, to come into the stall next to him. He waited for them to start helping their children change out of their wet bathing suits, and then he would turn on a camera and slip it underneath the stall to secretly record them at a swim school. Once he was in custody, the judge set his bail at $2 million and he was held. Then after a search warrant was conducted at his house, an Oakland County sheriffs held a press conference and delivered a statement that framed the scale of what their office was dealing with. Because they went farther than those recordings at his house and at the swim school, he reported that they had seized 6 computers, 4 cell phones, and 15 hard drives from Omer's residence. On just one of those devices, they found over 13,000 video files. The recordings, like I mentioned, spanned across at least 6 years. Some of the videos showed women who appeared to be either unconscious or asleep in hospital beds with Dr. Josh essaying them. I can't go into detail describing the things that he did, but I guarantee you it's probably worse than whatever you're imagining. Victims ranged from the age of 2 to adults, and authorities reported that they were not even sure of how many victims he had because there were that many, and it took months to try and identify who the victims were. They had to go through so many medical records to see what patients were under his care at the time that they had video evidence for and identify them that way. They also, of course, took statements from any victims who came forward reporting that they believed or they could have either been recorded or essayed without their knowledge. The Oakland County Sheriff's Office issued a public request for anyone from any state who had information about Dr. Josh or believed that they may have been a victim to contact the police department directly. And I'm saying any state because Dr. Josh had not only worked in Michigan, he had worked on contract at multiple healthcare facilities across the country, moving between hospitals, working as a traveling physician, meaning that the full geographic reach of what he had done was entirely unknown. In September of 2024, a class action lawsuit was filed in Michigan against him, the Henry Ford Health System, and the Henry Ford Hospital. The complaint alleged that the hospital system had failed to implement appropriate safeguards to protect patients from his disgusting behavior. A second lawsuit was also filed against the Detroit Medical Center. The lead attorney on that class action stated, quote, "This case is uniquely heinous. Oakland County law enforcement officials managing Dr. Josh's criminal investigation have called what they are uncovering one of the most disturbing cases they have ever seen in their career, exceeding the evils of Dr. Larry Nassar because this physician not only targeted women but also even children as young as 2 years old." By October of 2024, 3 additional women had filed individual lawsuits separate from the class action, each alleging that they had been essayed and recorded by Dr. Josh at Henry Ford Hospital. All 3 alleged that complaints had been made to the hospital but had been ignored. The attorney representing all 3 of them asking, quote, "What kind of systems, what kind of policies and procedures remain in place that allow people to fall through the cracks like this?" Ultimately, Henry Ford Health System, one of the largest hospital networks in Michigan, reached a $140 million settlement in the class action lawsuit brought on behalf of the victims. And on December 2nd of 2025, Omer Ajash was sentenced to 35 to 60 years in prison after he pleaded no contest to 31 counts of conduct across 2 separate cases. Ew. Sick in the head. He's sick in the head. And as you can imagine, when parents of the victims found out what had been going on, they felt extremely uncomfortable and upset and angry because how could you not? It's terrible. But that's all for me today. Thank you for spending time with me today. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.